Today we're going to talk about music theory, some of its practical applications, and why every musician should have a working knowledge of it. I had to come outside and talk about this for two reasons specifically. One, it is such a beautiful day outside that leads into the second reason, that I'm a little tired of being cooped up in my office. Although I love it, it's all optimized and primed to work, but I figured I'd go for a walk and share my thoughts about music theory with you. So let's go. There tends to be some confusion around the subject of music theory. You're a guitar player and you just want to play music. You're learning to play lead guitar, to solo, improvise, to make riffs. You just want to play the music that you love, and you might be wondering, do I really need to know music theory in order to do this thing? When I was first getting started, I didn't even know that music theory was a thing. I just thought that you learned everything by ear. That's how my grandfather learned, and he's the one that taught me the basics. He taught me the open chords and bar chords, and he learned everything by ear, so I just assumed that's the way you did things. Although now I realize that having great ear training skills and putting your time in that area is an extremely powerful skill to have. I've also realized that it's very limiting if you don't know any music theory at all. There are a few fundamental concepts in music theory that you should get a grasp on. Things like intervals, scales, key centers, diatonic harmony. You'll learn these things, you're going to get so much mileage out of them. Now notice there's a strong distinction here. Fundamentals, not basics. Basics are something that you learn, get really good at, and kind of forget about. In music, you never really forget about scales or intervals. You're always thinking about them. So they're fundamental concepts. You use them every day. Every time you pick up the instrument, every time you talk about music, every time you learn music, analyze, I use these things every day. So what is music theory? Music theory is a language that we use to communicate with each other when we're talking about music. It's the language we use to describe it, to analyze it, and to appreciate it. You might be wondering, what does music theory have to do with appreciating music? I'll tell you. Take boxing as an example. If you watch a boxing match without ever having practiced a sport or having any knowledge about it, all you're going to see is two guys trying to punch each other in the face. But if you were to take some boxing lessons or talk to a proficient boxer, someone that knows what they're talking about, then you might start to learn the concepts that lie underneath the sport. Things like distance management, cardio, the psychology of fighting somebody else, generating proper power in your punches. If you start to learn about these things, the next time you see a boxing match, you're going to understand the sport on a deeper level. You're going to look for things that you didn't previously notice before. It's the same thing with music. One of the greatest things about learning music theory is that it helps you understand it and appreciate it on a deeper level. It provides us with a universal language in which we can use to communicate with each other. And that takes us to the practical application of music theory. So for example, instead of using vague terms when talking about something that we're listening to, we can be way more precise and effective. I can think of one instance where we were going into the recording studio and the producer was telling us, hey, instead of resolving the song to the tonic chord, why don't we just let it finish on the dominant? And immediately, we all knew what that meant. It took a whole of 2 seconds for us to be on the same page. And looking at it from a learning perspective, it makes it way easier for me to digest new concepts. Not only do I have a reference point and a framework that I use to process musical information, but I also have a language in which I can communicate with my teacher. For example, I could ask a question like, what key is this song in? And immediately, he knows what that means. I know what that means. I mean, I might not know what the key of the song is, but I'm asking a specific question that helps my teacher guide me in the right direction. If you didn't know what a key is and where to begin, and you're trying to make your solos sound good, but they sound a little funky, you might be playing outside of the key. So you would need some way to ask that question. And again, music theory solves that problem. There is a myth that music theory might somehow take away from your musical creativity. So let me say this, the music always comes first. It's what you're hearing that comes first. Music theory tells the story of what we're hearing. When you start using music theory for the sake of using it to make something more complicated just because, that's when you can begin to get away from musical creativity and it becomes more of an intellectual exercise. So remember that when we're learning music theory, our priority is still the music itself. This is only to help us understand it and appreciate it on a deeper level. I would recommend getting started with intervals. What's an interval? It's the distance between two notes. That's the definition of it. This is a note, this is a note, distance between it. That's a one interval, that's a different interval. Distance is different. Guitar. Here, let's take the note A on the 6th string, right? Yes. If I play another note that's not A, well, technically, if I just play another note that's not the A that I just played, that's an interval, right? If I go to another note, that's another note. There are different types of intervals. So let's explore a few intervals. If we go from A to B, that's a major second. If I go from A to C sharp, that's a major third. A to D, that's a perfect fourth. A to E, that's a perfect fifth. If I go from A to F sharp, that's a major sixth. If I go from A to G sharp, that's a major seventh. And if I go from A to the next A, that's an octave above the A that we just played. So it's an A, it's just an octave above. And then the cycle would start again. A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. In a nutshell, those are intervals. Put all of these together and you have the major scale. The second point would be going into key centers. So for example, right now we were in the key of A. Why? Because A was our starting point. Every other note was in reference to A. B is a second because we're starting from A. C sharp is a major third because we're starting from A. If we were to start from G, C sharp would not be a major third. It would be a diminished fifth. So your key center is whatever you decide to call 1. If we decide to call G 1, then A is my major second, then B is my major third, then C is my perfect fourth, then D is my perfect fifth, then E is my major sixth, and F sharp is my major seventh, and then G is the octave. So you can pick different starting points and you would be in that key, right? And they all have, when you pull these notes together, it has a certain characteristic. You might have heard that before. Lastly, let's take a look at chord construction. You have your intervals, you have your key center, and lastly is chord construction. Making a chord basically means stacking notes in thirds. Or you could think about it as skipping every other note. Start on the A, skip B and go to C sharp, and then skip D and go to E. You get 1, 3, 5. Or you can play it in a way that's an A major chord. We usually play it like this. Shape looks different, but it's those three notes, A, C sharp, and E. Some of the notes are repeated, of course. We have the notes A, E, A, C sharp. So if you start from any other note in the scale and harmonize it in thirds, or just stack in thirds, for example, take B, skip C sharp, go to D, then skip E and go to F sharp, you get a minor chord, B minor. The notes are here, the shape looks different. And you could keep going, you can harmonize the whole scale. That's how you get chords. For example, C sharp, skip D and go to E, and skip F sharp and go to G sharp, you get a C sharp minor. In D, you just go D, F sharp, A. Or, again, the shape doesn't really matter right now. It's our understanding of how chords are made. When you get a big G chord here, it's just 1, 3, 5. That's it. G, B, D. Look at the shape. You have G on the 6th string, B on the 5th string, you have D on the 4th string, you have G on the 3rd string, you have B on the 2nd string, and then you have G again on the 1st string. G major.